Have you ever found yourself asking God, why didn't you stop it? Not something that happened out in the world, but something that happened in the church. The place where you expected to find safety became the place where you were wounded. The people who were supposed to reflect God's love left you questioning whether He was really there at all. If God is all powerful, why didn't He intervene? If He saw everything, why didn't He stop it? Those questions have caused many people to step away, not just from a church, but from God. And maybe that's where you are today. You have completely let go of your faith, but you're carrying questions you don't know how to answer. Before we go any further, I want you to know this: God is not offended by your questions. He's not asking you to pretend you're okay. Church hurt is different because it doesn't only break your trust in people, it can distort the way you see God. When someone who speaks in His name manipulates you, rejects you, abuses their authority, or betrays your trust, it's difficult to separate their actions from God's character. Your mind may know they're different, but your heart keeps asking, if God loved me, why didn't He protect me? That's an honest question, and it's one that deserves more than a quick answer. One of the most comforting verses in Scripture comes from David. David experienced betrayal, rejection, and years of suffering before he became king. In the middle of those difficult seasons, he wrote these words in Psalm chapter 34, verse 18. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Notice what David doesn't say. He doesn't say that those who follow God will never have their hearts broken. He says that when hearts are broken, the Lord draws near. That difference is important. Many of us assume God's presence should mean the absence of pain, but the Bible paints a different picture. God created people with the freedom to choose. Tragically, some people choose to do wrong, even inside the church. Now, that doesn't mean God approved of what happened. It doesn't lessen the pain. And it certainly doesn't make the person who hurt you right. In fact, throughout the Gospels, Jesus spoke some of His strongest words to religious leaders who used their position to control people, burden them, and hide behind outward appearances while neglecting the heart of God. The very people others looked up to were often the ones Jesus confronted most firmly. That tells us something important. Just because something happened in the church doesn't mean it reflected God's heart. God sees spiritual abuse. He sees manipulation. He sees hypocrisy. And He grieves over every wound inflicted in His name. I know that still leaves the question, why didn't He stop it? The truth is, the Bible doesn't answer every why we ask. There are moments when God doesn't explain why He allows something painful to happen. Instead, He continually reveals who He is. Think about Job. In a short period of time, Job lost his children, his health, and nearly everything he owned. Throughout his suffering, he asked difficult questions, but God never gave him a detailed explanation for why those tragedies happened. Instead, God revealed His greatness and reminded Job that he could be trusted even when life couldn't be understood. Think about Joseph. His own brothers betrayed him, sold him into slavery, and years later, he was falsely accused and imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. For a long time, it must have seemed as though God was silent. But Joseph eventually discovered that God had been working behind the scenes all along, bringing good out of what others intended for evil. Even David, who wrote so many of the Psalms, spent years running for his life before God fulfilled his promise that he would be king. There were nights when he cried out in fear, confusion, and loneliness, but God never abandoned him. I know none of these stories erase the pain, but together they remind us that God's silence is not the same as his absence. And maybe that's the realization someone listening today needs most. The deepest wound may not only be what happened in the church, it may be believing that because God didn't stop it, he must have left you. But the Bible tells a different story. Again and again, throughout the Bible, we see a God who stays close to the brokenhearted, a God who sees every injustice, a God who never stops working, even when we can't see his hand. That may not answer every question you have, but it changes where we look for the answer. So instead of asking, where was God? Begin asking, how was God holding me together when I couldn't even see him? One of the hardest things about church hurt is that it can change the way we think about God. Without realizing it, we begin attaching his name to someone else's actions. We expect him to respond the way they responded. We assume he sees us the way they saw us. Today, take a few moments and ask yourself one simple question. Am I responding to God? Or am I responding to what someone else did in his name? And that question isn't meant to make you feel guilty. It's meant to bring you clarity. You may discover that some of the anger you've been carrying isn't toward God at all. It's toward the person who misrepresented him. If that's true, tell God exactly where your heart is. Don't censor it. Don't worry about saying the right words. Just invite him to separate your pain from his character. Ask him to help you know him for who he truly is, not through the lens of your wound, but through the truth of his word. Sometimes healing begins when we stop allowing another person's failure to become the voice that tells us who God is. So if you've been asking yourself, why didn't God stop what happened to me in the church? I can't answer every why. The Bible doesn't always tell us why suffering is allowed, but it does tell us who God is. He is near to the brokenhearted. He sees every wound that others overlooked. He never confuses religion with relationship. And no matter what someone else did in his name, they never had the authority to redefine his character. Don't let the worst experience you've had with people become the final word about God. He is still gentle to the wounded. He is still faithful to the hurting. And he is still able to heal what others carelessly broke.